Hi, everybody. My name is Kirsten, and today I will be presenting part 2 of the quote, paraphrase, and summary workshop. Just a reminder, in the first part, we talked about entering the conversation in academia, how to use direct quotes, and also how to properly cite quotations. So for today, for part 2, we are going to be focusing on paraphrase and summary. So paraphrase. The first is, what is paraphrase? Basically what it is when you put the ideas from a sentence or passage from a secondary source into your own words. This is really important, this part of putting it into your own words. This is where things can get tricky. So you really want to make sure that that is at the forefront of your paraphrasing. Make sure that you're not using quotation marks because it's in your own words. That's okay. You don't need to use quotation marks. Of course, we just need to cite it. Remember that this is your own rendition of the essential information and ideas that are expressed by someone else, presented in a completely new form. Again, what's really important that you're completely transforming the original statement. This is a legitimate way, when accompanied by accurate documentation, to borrow from a source. Paraphrasing is completely okay as long as you're giving credit where credit is due. And it is a more detailed restatement than a summary, which focuses on concision and concisely on a single main idea, where paraphrase can, talk about different ideas. You can paraphrase multiple things, but when you're summarizing a full chapter or a full book, it's going to be a little bit different. We'll get to that. We'll get to that soon. But most importantly, no matter what you're doing, paraphrase, summary, quotes, you always cite your source. And you're going to hear me say that multiple times throughout this presentation. So when should you paraphrase? Well, when the idea is more important than the language itself. So when the idea from the secondary source is more important than the language. When the words in the source are super complex, but the point is simple. And this kind of goes into the next bullet, which is when the author's writing style does not fit your own. That can be because maybe the words are really complex, or maybe, the flow or the cadence of the original statement just doesn't really fit with the genre you're writing or with your own style of writing. And this is when paraphrasing is really good. Again, because you're completely transforming this other person's sentence and words. It really does work well when you are, trying to fit it within your own style. And lastly, a lot of times quoting is discouraged by your academic field, by the genre, the style that you're writing in, or even by the class or professors. And so they want to see a lot of paraphrasing if quoting is limited. So again, it's just a really good skill to have. So how do I cite a paraphrase? It's going to be exactly the same as a quotation. So you're going to have this slide twice, just as a refresher, because it is so important to make sure that we're citing. So you're going to use an in-text citation, either with the author's last name and page number if you are writing an MLA, or the author's last name and the year of publication if you are writing an APA format. If you have not introduced the author of the source, you're going to have the in-text citation be at the end, like we have here in this first example. You can see I've done it in APA format, so I have the last name and then the year of publication, and just make sure that the in-text citation goes before the period. Again, as a refresher, if you've introduced the author in the beginning, like we have here in this second example, all you need is either the page number for MLA, like we've done here, or the year of publication for APA. So we're now going to do two examples of paraphrasing, one that doesn't work well and one that is a successful example of paraphrasing. So the passage that we're going to be using today is this one right here. Excuse me. So students frequently overuse direct quotation in taking notes, and as a result, they overuse quotations in the final research paper. Probably only about 10% of your final manuscript should appear as directly quoted matter. Therefore, you should strive to limit the amount of exact transcribing of source materials while taking notes. So here is an unsuccessful paraphrase. What it says is often students overuse direct quotation in note taking and it makes them use too many quotes in their final paper. It is smart to only have 10% of your final paper be direct quotation, so try and limit writing down exactly what is said while taking notes. So the language here is nearly identical to the original passage. You can see students overuse direct quotation, which is right here as well. They've changed it to note taking instead of taking notes, which sounds right, almost identical. They've said, have 10%, limit the amount of exact transcribing, limit writing down exactly. So the language is way, way, way too similar. Even the kind of cadence of this paraphrase is too similar. And so unfortunately, this could be considered plagiarism because you have not taken the original passage and completely transformed it into your own words. So this is an example of what you do not want to do. Next, we're going to look at a successful example of paraphrasing. So we're using the same passage. So this one says, in research papers, students often quote excessively, failing to keep quoted material down to a desirable level. Since the problem usually originates during note-taking, it is essential to minimize the material recorded verbatim. So even the way they've started this paraphrase, the original statement say students frequently overuse, this one goes right into research papers. It's small, but it makes a big difference. They've used words like excessively, where the original passage uses just overuse. This paraphrase you can see is also shorter, right? Because it really is paraphrasing what they're saying. They don't have the 10%, and they've transformed transcribing of source materials while taking notes to note taking. It is essential to minimize the material recorded verbatim. So the language is different, the cadence is different, and this is again an example of a successful paraphrase. Another thing I didn't note in the last one, there wasn't a citation at all, which is another bad example, right? We always need to cite. So you can see here we have a successful MLA citation. This is a fantastic example of paraphrasing. So next we're going to move on to summary. So when you summarize, what you're doing is providing a broad overview of the main ideas of a work of a longer passage. So your summary is going to be significantly shorter than the passage or work you are summarizing. So summary is all about concision. How can we take a full chapter, a full article, and put it into a few sentences? Again, like always, you must always cite your source. So when should you summarize? Like I just mentioned, when you want to share the main ideas of an entire chapter or a text, when you want to take a long passage and condense it down to just its main points, to provide background or illustrate supporting evidence, but keep it very brief, like a few sentences should do the trick. So again, this is taking something that has really good ideas, but maybe does it in a really long way, and taking those and putting it into a really concise summary. Be careful not to include your opinions in your summary. Remember, we're still using this source as a resource, so we want to stay true to the original work, which means we're not including our opinions in our summary because our opinions are not in the original statement. And then make sure to not include details that do not relate to the main idea. So if you're summarizing chapter 1, keep it to just summary of chapter 1. Don't bring in, small points from chapter 2 or chapter 3 of a source. So how do you cite a summary? The same way, right? Here's just, again, another refresher. Remember to say, to keep either author's last name and page number for MLA or author's last name and year of publication if you are doing APA. So one last thing we're going to talk about today is if you're summarizing an entire work, one thing that is a little bit different is you don't need to be so strict on page numbers as long as you are introducing the chapter and the book in a very specific way. So you can see here in this first example, we've said in chapter 1 of Braving the Wilderness, The Quest for True Belonging and the Courage to Stand Alone, Brene Brown. So we've established where it comes from, the novel, what chapter it is, and who wrote it. That is more than enough, right? We'll be able to go to your works cited see the book on there quite clearly and be able to really compare the summary to that chapter. We don't need to say in chapter 1 on pages 25 to 35. There's just no need for it. Right here, we've made it completely clear. Same thing for this next one when you're doing an article. When you're summarizing a full article, you don't need to do the pages. Again, Susan McDonald's Professional Academic Writing in the Humanities and Social Sciences. It lets us know who wrote it and what we're summarizing. And that is more than enough. So now that we've gone over quotations, paraphrasing, and summaries, we are finished with part 1 and part 2. There are just some things we want you to take away before you head into part 3. So remember that quotations must be copied word for word. Paraphrasing shouldn't use the language from the text. It needs to be completely transformed and into your own words. Summaries can and often do contain, paraphrase, and sometimes quotations. You know, depending on the length of the piece that you're summarizing, it could use, you know, multiple quotations, and quite often it will be paraphrased. So just keep that in mind. Essays will typically contain a mixture of all 3 of these things: quotation, paraphrase, and summary. Maybe you'll only have 2 of the 3, maybe you'll have all 3. But again, this is all dependent on the genre you're writing in, the class expectations, and what your professor is asking of you. And last but not least, if you take one big thing away from this presentation, is remember to always, always, always cite your source. It is so important to give credit where credit is due. Okay, well, thank you for watching part 2. Come back for part 3 to learn a little bit about the quotation sandwich.